want to talk here about key in terms of color, high key, low key. What I've done here is put our little tonal grid here going from 1 to 10. There's 2 of them. There's no reason other than it's just I printed 2 of them, but they go from 1 to 10. You can see here I've indicated high key would be up in the 1, 2, 3, 4 zone there, possibly 5. The low key, of course, is dark down in the 10, 9, 8, maybe 7, and then you have mid keys, I suppose, here. So the 2 extremes would be high key, low key. If we apply that to color, we have here the 3 primary colors, blue, red, yellow. And what I've done is, I'll show you the image, that I tried to place these in terms of where they would be in the tonal scale. The blue comes down about 9, possibly 10. The yellow, or the beg your pardon, put that there just as an indicator. The red, beg your pardon, is somewhere up around the 7. And the yellow, strangely enough, when we do think about yellow being a bright color, but it's actually more around 3 in the tonal scale. And when we see this in black and white, you'll see what I mean by that. So yellow can be a bit deceptive. However, yellow is definitely up in the high key zone anyway. The other 2 aren't. So obviously, to make a painting with high key colors, I need to get my colors up into this sort of range of tone. Obviously, that we can be doing that with the use of white. And again, it's very deceptive how little color we need to make things happen. So in other words, if I put a load of white there and just a little touch of blue, it goes blue. You can see the change starting to happen. You can see the blue appearing to stir through that there. And I might risk a little bit more. But what I want to do is get my paint to at least the level 4 here in terms of brightness. So I don't want to go below a level 4 because I want it to be high key. So again, we're not dealing with super scientific things here, but and we can judge it ourselves, and we don't have to. If we don't stay within the 1 to 4 zone, it doesn't mean our painting is bad or anything. It's just a logic behind that. So if you see the blue that I've got on here now, already I actually think I'm just about there. In fact, I'm in danger of going down, to be honest, to this darker tone. Obviously the paint will dry differently, but I'm just about up there. I think we could afford perhaps that to be a tiny tad lighter, but certainly that's my limit there with regards to the key, the color key. So I can make lighter and lighter from that, but I don't want to make darker and darker, if that makes sense. So I have a pale version of my blue there. Likewise, do the same with my red here. So again, quite a lot of white. In this case, it's always best to start with white and add the color into white, because if you start with a large amount of red, it will take an awful lot of white to get it to that sort of tone, and it's a real waste. So start with the white and then tint it bit by bit, tiny little bit of red there you can see going in, and even that has changed the tonal value. It's bringing the white down a little bit. If I put a little bit on the end of this here, a bit streaky, but we can try it anyway. Hold that up there, and again you can see, if you half close your eyes and look at that tonal value, it's maybe in there, it's maybe a wee bit higher, somewhere in between those. I could maybe go a little bit darker in order to get to that number 4, so I can maybe bring a little more red into that, not too much, and we would get somewhere in that sort of region here. So really what we're doing is making very pastel shades of the colors here, Now when we come to the yellow, we could argue, well, look, it's already into the 3, I think I said it was. So we may say, well, look, that's it, then we start with that, and we can go and add a little bit more white and bring it up to number 2 and number 1 and all the rest of it. So there's a little range of high key color. So what we'll do is we'll try and work with these colors. So what I'm going to do here is just play around with the colors that I've made in this range here. I haven't always thought about what I'm going to paint. I'll paint something that might be, let's say, an apple. Okay, so we'll create a little apple shape there. All right, and we'll maybe have it going from reds to greens. Okay, so wee bits of red on this side, maybe working over to the greener tones. So what we'll do is we'll clean the brush up and we'll mix together a little of that pale blue that I've got there, tiny little bit of my yellow, and you'll see that going greener. You can see the comparison with the blue, the original blue. So I can then say, okay, well, we'll do that. Keep in mind, by the way, I've probably dropped the tone of this slightly, because when you mix two colors together, there's a chance that the tone will drop. But theoretically, if they're both the same value, they will stay a similar sort of value. But I'm just blocking this in as two sides to this shape here, okay? And remember that we can say to ourselves, well, we'll introduce a little yellow in there, and we can go lighter. Remember, these were the number 4s, if you like. So we can afford to add more white to them. So in other words, in the yellow here, what I'm doing is adding quite a bit more white. So I'm getting this lighter greenish color, okay, yellow color. What I'll do is I'll try maybe to blend that a little bit. It's drying very quickly. It's acrylic paints, but we can see that we can do that, and I'll lighten the red because, as I say, we can afford to bring it to the higher key and maybe have a little light tone going around there. And of course, what we're really doing is we're creating pinks and things here, which are not necessarily very natural colors. So these are pure primary colors. Remember that we could also desaturate this. Remember the old rule that if we add green, and I'll maybe try it here, if I add a little, make up another little bit of green here, keeping in mind that I want that green to be a nice high key. So that's gone a little bit dark, so I'm going to scoop a little bit of white in there. So I've got maybe gone a wee bit too far, but a wee bit more yellow, a wee bit more blue. So we have this palest of greens here. And for example, if I put a little of that into my pale red, I desaturate it. And I don't know if you can see that, how that color has gone there from that pink to this slightly earthier color. And that's the same as if we desaturate any color. The only difference is everything's lighter here. So I can put this more neutral color over here if I wanted to. And likewise with any of the other things, I can desaturate these as long as I keep it within this high key range, you know. I can perhaps even think about throwing in a background, you know. Likewise, it's still up about the number 3, 4 in our color range, in our tonal range. Just put that in really just for convenience, but you can see that maybe helps that to come out, you know. And so it's all very soft and all very pastely, but that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about high key colors. We can mix these any old way. I mean, I can mix that red and a little bit of blue in there, and obviously I'll get this muddy sort of purple, which is far, far, far too dark, as we know. So then if I take my little bit of white and bring in this purple, you see that? So we're now making a purpley color, but it's still high key. It's still that light thing. So now I'm turning those reds a bit more purplish color, you know, and they are kind of odd colors. But the point is, if we're trying to play with color and experiment with mood and color, then we've got to accept that we're moving away from reality. We're moving away from representing the world necessarily exactly as it is. What I could do, and we've talked about this before, giving a little accent to things. So what I can do is maybe say, well, I'll let myself go a wee bit deeper in tone, you know, a wee bit further down that scale, and say, well, we'll just drop a little bit of shadow in there, small amount. And you see how that just changes that there. We just throw that one little spark in. Don't go crazy, because otherwise you turn the whole thing into a low-key picture then. So that's one way to prepare your palette in order to do a high-key painting. In other words, have your colors mixed and lightened, and check them if you want against that grid even. But you know, your instinct will tell you that that these are light colors, and then mix them as you would in normal circumstances. So what I'm going to try now, just use the same little piece of paper, is just underneath here, maybe try to create a similar image in a low key. So obviously we know that that pure blue, that pure red, and the yellow are pure primary colors. So we know that those two are certainly in the low key range, because we've seen it. The yellow, as we said, was up around number 3. So it's strictly speaking a high key color. So what do we do about that? Well, the thing is, if we put anything into yellow, it will probably go either green or orange. You know, what we only have the option of adding some other color, and if we add red to it, it'll go slightly more orange. If we add blues to it, it'll go green. So in order to get it darker, we kind of lose the yellowness of it. Now, in saying that, the yellow that I have here is a lemon yellow, and if you look here at this, which is cadmium yellow, you can see that it's slightly deeper in tone. So we can work with that. That will give us a start at least. And we can maybe add little bits of red just to make it lean into the orange end of yellow, if you like. So with these two combined with the yellow, we can maybe start to produce colors that are more low key. So again, if I start this time and say, okay, well, I'm going to start with this red. And again, I'm not desaturating the colors here at the minute. I'm just working with what we've got, and then we can think about it perhaps later on. Okay, so imagine this simple ball shape, and we'll have that going on there. So this is pure red at the moment anyway, and we'll fade it over, and maybe we introduce the yellow at this point. Maybe you can see there this cadmium yellow coming in there, blending around there, and we'll go across eventually, and maybe start to get a bit of green in the other side. Just give the brush a little rinse there, and I'll make the green with the cadmium yellow rather than the lemon yellow, because that means I know that I've got a low key green, a deep green there. Okay, so we can put this sort of green in there, this nice deep color. Of course we want variation in light and shade, but as long as that variation stays within the low key end of things, then that keeps the theory going, the principle going. You know, as I say, this is drying on me, but we'll work at it and try and work these colors together, from the greens over through this orangey color, eventually to the reds as well, you know, and a bit more of that yellow in there. So there's maybe not so much red, just a little bit of red on the very edge there. And as they mix together, they are desaturating each other, they're muddying each other up, which is kind of good in a way. It enhances that idea of the dark tones. And maybe I can come in with a little bit of red. Remember that I can come up a little bit, because I'm still probably down in the low key end of things here. So I can put the odd little bit of lighter tone in the edge of this here, just to catch the bit of highlight, but we're not yet anywhere up to the extremes of the one above it. And likewise with my green, I can maybe put a little white into this green up here. It's got a wee bit of red in it, beg your pardon, so I'll do that again. I'm working very fast, and can be a bit ram-stam, as my father used to say. So I'm getting here, I want this green to be a little bit lighter, but not too much. So we've got a sort of a thing going on there get a little bit more of that yellow in there. So we've kind of got a slightly lighter green up here, look, yeah, on that side. So maybe pretend there's a wee bit of light catching this side. As I say, it's all very flying by the seat of our pants a wee bit here, but we can see that because we're not straying into too much white, I'm going to spread the green a little bit further there across this here, so that when we're unified a bit, it's getting a wee bit bitty. But so there we are, you know, there's a wee bit more modelling going on. But more importantly is the fact that we have an image here which is essentially low key. I'm going to do what I did with that one, give it a little bit of accent and just throw in a little bit of tone, which is maybe just outside the range of low key, so that we get a wee bit of brightness on the edge of it. But you can see some sort of form begin to happen. But look at the two images and look at the airiness of that and the heaviness of this. And that's what you can do in terms of a landscape or a portrait or whatever. If you have this sort of range, you have a different mood, different sense of light and shade, different sense of atmosphere, you know. I'm just playing myself here with it, just little bits of light just to play around. And we could do the same with that one. But hopefully you can see what we mean when we talk about high key and low key colors. So just to sum up this little idea of key, high key, low key, no matter what color you use or combinations of colors you use, they can all be brought together with some sort of harmony through key, through the lightness of the color, the brightness of the color. So you can have all dark colors, all light colors, all mucky colors, but if you lighten them up, they'll all become a high key. You can mix and match. You might have colors that are very rich or colors that are very mucky and grey in the same painting. But if all the colors are lightened, then what keeps them in their family, if you like, is the fact that they're all high key or low key if they're all deeper. So just finally here, what I'm going to do is hopefully just share the screen here with a little picture. Hopefully you're seeing that. You can see there, if we work at the yellow is a very pure yellow. That's straight from the tube. I squeezed that. It was a lemon yellow, actually, straight out of the tube. And obviously it's very pure, but it's light. So it's a high key color, high key. The second one is pure blue, again, straight from the tube. I think it might have been ultramarine or something like that, but not mixed with anything. But it's a low key color because it's darker. If you squint and look at that, you will clearly see the blue is darker than the yellow. And that squinting idea, it may sound funny, but if you get the habit of looking at things in terms of closing your eyes about halfway, you will see the differences in the brightness much more easily. If we move to the third one, this is a mucky, yucky color that I mix with all sorts of colors. But it's a low key color. So the blue and that are both low key. If we go to this one, this is this color with white in it. So it's a mucky gray color. It's not particularly rich and pure, but it's a high key, which would match with that. So what you can do is match similarities. So I might make a painting that has high key using grays and very subtle colors and occasional little bits of that. A rich color, as long as it's also high key. Likewise, the two in the middle, I can make a painting that's all these muddy, earthy landscape colors, and then with a little flash of smaller amounts of pure color, put that together. But what will make them harmonize is the fact that they're all low key. So really, that is the takeaway from this. Be aware of separating color and tone. Try to practice doing that. That when you see something in front of you, it might have lots of color, but you try to mentally switch off the color and look at it in terms of dark and light. And that's a skill that has to be practiced. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. This is a little leaf painting I did. I actually did it a while ago for another sort of demonstration, I think. I've just been working on it there, and it's entirely based on one color. It's a monochromatic harmony. So you can see there that I think it was sap green that I used, and all I've done is have more dense sap green and less dense sap green, just to create variations in tone. So there's no other color involved at all. So what I want to do is just experiment here with transparency of color. So here's an image that is one color only. It's not mixed in any way. What I've got here is some of the complementary color of that, which is red. So we've got the green here. This is a crimson red. It's diluted in different amounts. That's quite more dilute than that. But what I'm going to try to do is vary it anyway in some ways and get variations of dilution, if that makes sense, and apply them over the top of this. I'm going to do it fairly randomly. I'm not necessarily going to spend too much time. I'm rustling around here with brushes just to find a brush that's not too big for this job. So you can see, hopefully there are my colors, and I'm going to wash bits over that. It may shine in the lights here, and then hopefully when it dries back, we'll be able to see how it has affected the whole thing. So I don't know if you're seeing that coming into shot. Yeah, the variations of reds. And the thing is, when we first put some of these reds over this, sometimes you can't really see a great deal happening, but as I say, it's when it dries down. So I'm selecting a few areas here, putting this particular red over the top of the greens that existed before, leaving other areas, because what I'm going to do is maybe just say, okay, I'll come back and do this in a different density of red. So it's just fairly random patches. But what I'm trying to achieve here is this sense that there's going to be variations in the density of the red. Therefore, it will affect the green in different ways. So if I have a very strong red over this, it's going to desaturate quite a lot. If I have a very weak red, it will do that much less. So, and if it's not there at all, it'll remain green, you know. But it's extremely light, you don't know if you see that, extremely watery paint. It's just tinting and no more here. So really, I'm not doing much to go too extreme too quickly. But what this points out is how little it takes to make an adjustment to a color, because as we know, that was a very strong green there, is a very strong green. And as I'm just putting this very wishy-washy red over the top of it, it's actually changing the green fairly noticeably. And hopefully, when, as I say, when it's dry, we will see this better. It will have dried in. So the greens then don't become as raw. I'm hesitating with these central areas because they were done fairly recently, and I'm a wee bit anxious about them not being completely dry, but we'll take a chance. I'm putting a very strong red over them. You can see a relatively strong red. You can see it now in there and in there and so on, and just let that be there. We'll not play around too much with it. But if we can see this now, and as I say, we'll give it a couple of minutes to dry back and see how that changes the intensity of the green. So I think I'm at my limit now. I'm in danger in a sense of rubbing away the watercolor itself, the original green. So what I'm going to do is just stop there and let it dry and see how that changes it. So you can see here how the reds have begun to turn the greens that brownish color or whatever, this neutral color here. Some of it's slightly redder than others, dependent on how dense my watercolor was. Some of it was extremely watery, some was slightly more pigment, slightly more paint in there. So what I might do now is, now this is dry now, and what I want to do maybe is take and put another layer of green over this. So I'm not mixing the color on the palette here. I'm putting one color down, then putting another and another layer by layer, because that means that the marks I make underneath here will stay there unless I rub and rub at it, but generally speaking they'll stay, whereas if I was mixing and as I went, it would be slightly different. So what I can do is create patterns and texture, then when they're dry they won't move, and all I'm doing is varying the color of those. So I'm going to put a green over red, so we've had red over green, and now I'm going to wash some green across the red. So I'm pretty much going to put an overall wash over this. So I'm just going to, you can see quite quickly, put that green tint over each segment of this sort of leaf here. And as I say, it was an invented leaf, so don't ask me what plant it belongs to. It is an imaginary leaf for this demonstration. So you can see now, as I've buried, as it were, all of it below the green, it's come down again. The colour has become much more subtle again, and what we'll do is we'll pause that and let that dry. So here we are with another layer of paint over this, and hopefully you're beginning to see that this is slowly melting down in terms of colour. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to take and work some more reds over this, and this may be a last layer. We'll just see how it goes anyway. So I'm making, you can see up some red here, and this is the point. The point is that these are pure colours here we're using. We're not mixing subtle colours first. And yet we are achieving more and more subtle colours as we go. So I'm going to put this red on here. I'm pretty sure this is fairly dry. This will probably be quite strong, this red, but sure, let's see how we go with it. And maybe just take and wash, maybe not everything, maybe leave a few pieces of green alone, as it were. So I'm leaving a few little bits of green from the previous layer. Just let those be and see what happens, okay? So say it might be a wee bit on the red side, but the point of the exercise is really to look at how one colour affects the other, one below or one above the other. So we can see there, I'm just leaving the odd gap just to create a little bit of interest and texture in it, you know. To say this is not really, I feel it's not really about a drawing of a leaf as much as just what colour does to each other. As I say, you can see there that's fairly red, but what we'll do is we'll dry that and see what we get. As I say, we'll just work some reds over those lines a bit and bring that down. So we've got another layer going on here, and we'll dry that as well. So again, we've dried this, and you can see how the reds have muddied the greens up, and I think I'll just keep going actually, and I'll put more green over here. This has got slightly on the redder side again, so I'll just put more green and break this up with greens on top. So another layer of green on top of the reds, and each time we do this we are burying one colour below the other until they neutralize each other. Again, I'm leaving the odd gaps, so some of those reds that were quite red I'm just leaving to see what happens, but the rest of it I'm introducing this just again sap green, no difference in the colours at all. But what's happening is that we are getting, this must be layer number, I don't know, 4 perhaps. And maybe what I'll do is I'll not do too much to this, the left hand side actually, just to see how that contrasts with this side when it's dry actually, you know. So we'll do that, we'll leave that alone, and we'll just dry this part. And hopefully now what you can see here is how we're achieving some lovely subtle browny greens, earthy greens and things. And you know, over here where I didn't touch it, you can see where that's maintained a slightly more reddish tint, and there's the result. When I put green over the top of that reddish, again I got that lovely earthy green. Some of the greens that I've left behind are very vibrant now, you can see where they weren't touched. And again over this side you can see bits where I've left that, but overall the image is getting richer and more interesting in terms of color, and I could keep on doing this for a little while. Eventually there's the danger that I'll break away the structure, the underlying structure of it, because the water will start to melt away the paint. But you know, if I take my time about it, I can avoid that. But what you can see is the character of the leaf coming out compared to what it was at the very beginning, when it was simply a monochromatic harmony, a monochromatic color harmony.